definitely a unique podcast experience.
I did one with one of the other guests, and it started raining, and like we didn't stop, and so we did it throughout the rain on the boat.
That's awesome.
But I think this is part of the Monad madness, right? That's what
true.
we're here for.
That's true.
Monad Eunice.
Monad.
Very nice having you here.
Thank you, Carmel. Very glad to be here.
Yes. So we're going to touch base upon like a lot of things about your life and like everything about Monad as well.
Great.
You've been a pastry chef, right? You've been an MIT CS undergrad,
yes.
right? And you've also been in the Web2 fintech companies like leading payments for Shutterstock. And you're also the co-founder and CEO of Monad, right?
Yes,
Before we dive into all that madness and unpack that, who is Eunice and what's your story?
Oh man, okay. Where do I start? I hope you already did a pretty good, thorough background on where I've been, what I've done. I guess a little bit about me. I grew up in California. Basically, the city that I'm from is known for agriculture primarily. I remember when I was growing up, going to high school, I would drive past like a cow pasture.
Yeah.
So every morning I'd be, looking out the window of the car and seeing just like dairy cows walk around. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's not there anymore. It's become a little bit more of a proper city, or small town kind of city. But I guess outside of that, I don't know. I'm a city girl by heart. I went to school in Boston, so naturally after graduation coming to New York, it was a really fun experience for me.
You were a really good and like bright student, right? I think you've like had like multiple scholarships throughout like your academic career as well,
I think you're giving me way too much credit. I think if anything, there's a sense of diligence that I have. Maybe it's, the Asian background.
Yeah.
My tiger mom, I don't know.
Yeah, nice. And so I think you did like a minor in finance as well, right? Did you always wanted to like end up in the finance industry growing up?
Well, back when I was in school, so this was like 2009 to 2013, it was a popular industry to get into. Everyone was like, oh, you want to get the trading internships, you want to do investment banking or consulting or something along those lines. So I honestly didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had grown up always thinking that I was going to go into the field of medicine. But going to MIT, the rigor of coursework made me realize that I would just be grinding for 4 years without any promise of being able to make it, go to med school, all of that stuff. So decided to take the opportunity, being at a technology institution, to really hone in on the engineering skills. I actually initially switched into mechanical engineering before doing computer science.
Interesting.
Yeah, which was cool. It was fun working with materials. I loved the labs, loved being able to like push and pull materials and see how different metals, would perform under stress, as an example. But the downside of mechanical engineering is that when you graduate, very few opportunities exist to actually do mechanical engineering outside of school. You have to do like master's programs or PhD programs or something along those lines. And so that's kind of where computer science came along. I also enjoyed the problem-solving aspect of it. So yeah, and then through that, understanding what opportunities existed outside of the field of computer science. Obviously, a lot of software companies during that time. Facebook was really big during that time, Twitter, but finance as well. So going into whether it's high-frequency trading or various sell-side trading, yeah, that was like the thing to do.
Right. So right after you graduated, I think you worked in Bank of America for a while. Then you moved to Shutterstock for a while. You led like their payments arm, right? And then you became a pastry chef as well, right?
Yes.
Walk me through those years of like this entire journey.
Yeah. So the pastry journey in particular was interesting. Going to work as a trading analyst, it's a kind of a big culture shock. You're suddenly in the middle of like a giant trading floor. I remember I had, I think, 6 monitors at one point, which wasn't even like, the craziest monitor setup on the floor, but definitely
How many do you have right
environment. Now? I have 2.
Okay.
If you count my laptop, I have 3.
Okay. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, so high stress environment. And I found baking as an interesting outlet. I had always enjoyed desserts. Like, I think I just naturally have a sweet tooth. As much as I wish I didn't.
Yeah.
So baking became like a fun outlet for me, and decided to just maintain that throughout the several years of working. So from Bank of America to Broadway Technology, all the way to Shutterstock. I had always kind of thought, like, what if I opened up a bakery? You know, what if that became my life? Because I enjoyed baking so much. Like, what if that was my thing?
Yeah.
So I was encouraged to, like, well, why don't you give it a shot? You know, go to pastry school. So I did.
Yeah.
I went to pastry school part-time in the evenings while working full-time during the day, working a normal job. And it was just like rushing back and forth for a full year. Work, school, sleep, repeat.
Yeah. Was that more hectic, or is being the founder of Monad more hectic?
I think this is definitely more hectic.
Okay.
The interesting part of like having to do like the work, school, sleep, repeat was that there was at least there were different aspects of the day, you know, so I could be like, okay, this is my professional time, or like, this is my baking time. Whereas with Monad, there's just so many things to do. And granted, there's a lot of variability in the day-to-day, so that's always been fun. But I think the sheer magnitude of what we're attempting to build with the Monad blockchain and the technology behind it is definitely more challenging, I'd say.
Nice. So you've been in New York for like almost 10 years now, right?
Yeah.
You're like the perfect example of someone who can build parallelized blockchains but still can't figure out like the subway properly, right?
1 second while I fix my hat.
Okay. Let's go. Monad back on. Yeah. Awesome. Let's now break down the Monad madness, right?
Sure.
I think the TLDR of Monad should be parallelized blockchain, not parallelized blockchains, as you rightfully tweeted,
Yeah.
right? But let's like explain Monad to everyone like with 5.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, so Monad is a new EVM blockchain, an L1, and we're focused on hyper performance. So it's optimized through pipelining on various parts of the stack. We do things like parallelized execution, which I think is what most people are familiar with.
Right.
But alongside that, there's also asynchronous execution. The last thing is a different consensus mechanism as well. That's called Monad BFT. It is similar in function to many other BFT style algorithms. The difference being that we're working towards really really optimizing the communication between various nodes around the world, hopefully making it far more efficient to support the 10,000 transactions per second that we're targeting.
Right. I think like the first time when we met, there was an interesting analogy that you used about like the Windows XP user and like the entire experience and people still sticking to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was so that was from the perspective of like application building and why is there a need for another L1, which was a question that we got a lot in the early days of like why are we building another L1? There's so many out there. There's now L2s, sometimes L3s.
Yeah.
And the answer to that is like building a fundamentally better platform, the same way that Windows 95 was around for many, many years, and it worked just fine. You could run, Word, Excel on it, various other things. I think, Minesweeper, which is fun. But then when XP came about, that was like a new era of applications. Suddenly, the software that we had for Microsoft Office Suite got so much better. We then saw like in desktop games, like the pinball machine game, like that would never have been possible on Windows 95.
Right.
So in a similar vein, the unlocks that the Monad blockchain brings will hopefully also usher in a new type of application diversity.
Right. I've also heard that you keep everyone in check in the Monad team, right? And there's a very strict Slack hygiene, right? Where you can't use certain words, right? Like what is all that about?
Well, I think if anything, it's just trying to promote a culture of positivity. So Slack hygiene, I think, is always very good to maintain, maintain organization and cleanliness. So the team has been growing a lot, and with a growing team, more messages on Slack.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a matter of organization.
Nice. All right, let's now try to break down the art of fundraising $225 million, right? Monad raised $225 million from like the tier 1 VCs, Paradigm, Electric, Dragonfly, Coinbase Ventures, everyone, right? Can you break down like how was the entire journey from starting Monad to reaching this point, right? And like when you were pitching, were you pitching to like just tier 1 VCs? When you reached out, were you reaching out to tier 3 VCs? And like, how did those conversations go about? How did the feedback come about? How did the race close? Like literally everything.
Okay, that's definitely a lot to cover.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the early days, we were bootstrapping what we were building. It was
So what year was this? How did all the co-founders come about? Like, tell me everything.
Sure. Okay. So Monad Lab started in 2022.
Yeah.
It was James, our CTO, Keone, our CEO, and myself as COO. So it was just the three of us for many, many months.
How did you all meet?
So I met Keone in college. At MIT, we were both studying CS. After graduation, Keone and James met at Jump Trading. He went into HFT while I went into
How was
LFT.
Keone in college?
Keone was pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Like, he's always been very much like a figure. Like everyone knew him as like the smartest guy in the class who would take like 12 classes per term. Yeah, and he graduated with like 4 individual degrees. Like everyone, I graduated with 1. I was like, yeah, I made it. And he has like a stack of 4 that he was carrying across. So yeah, that's him.
Nice. All right. Yeah. Sorry, you were saying.
Yeah.
So you all three met.
Right. So so I met, basically Keone was the unifying factor. I met him in college. James met him through their time at Jump Trading and HFT. And so the brainchild of, Monad was essentially like the brainchild of James, and he's the chief architect at our company as well, CEO, wearing many hats. But the identification of how to make blockchain better platforms for HFT. So having to build like low latency systems, like being very rigorous about systems design, writing efficient algorithms, like that all comes into play with building a very efficient blockchain as well. I kind of joined the team as like adding a third dimension, so to speak. I'm not as technical. I haven't written a line of code in many years. Although I did write a few lines of code in the early days of Monad. It's not in the code base anymore, I promise, don't worry. Yeah, so I think it's the third dimension, having a little bit more of experience, and I don't know, providing a little bit more, I guess, like operational direction, let's say.
Right. So this was around Feb 2022, right?
This was like in basically the first 6 months or so of 2022, from like March, April, all the way through when we first hired our first few engineers in July. They joined and really helped us start upping the pace of research. So that started in early 2023. It was also around the time that we announced the first seed raise.
Right. How big was the first seed round?
19 million.
19. And how were those conversations like at the time when it was just like a team of like 3 to 7 people?
Yeah, I think it was very much the same with what I had mentioned before with like the why an L1. So it was a lot of having to convince people like why an L1, and the idea of how to build out the team, finding the right set of engineers, and working through various challenges that environment during 22 after FTX into 23 brought. So that was like round 1. We started growing a lot in 2023. Added a ton of people throughout the summer into the later part of the year. I think by the end of 23, we were around 26 people, I want to say, 25, 26 people. I might be, plus or minus 2 here.
Yeah, like the entire objective of this conversation is to, let's say, educate founders who are building on Monad ecosystem, or like founders in general who want to aspire for a raise this big, right? What are like, let's say, the 3 things that really worked for you that you'd like to pass it on?
Well, I think for us, it's more of like, we want to build a very impactful product. It's not that we were chasing after a specific valuation or anything like that. We just wanted to build something that wanted and want to build something that will be game-changing for the industry. And I think that is, recognized by various members of the community, including investors. And that's just kind of what came about. Obviously, with building any type of tech company, there is an element of needing funds up front to support what you're doing, especially when it's like pre-revenue. So funding is certainly important. I think the biggest thing that I would say is to communicate the reasons behind why you're building and how impactful what you're building is going to be to your target audience. So having a good understanding of, the W's basically, the who, the why, I guess the when and the how.
All right. So I think like a good product and like how impactful it is for you, right?
Right.
Another aspect of like a good fundraise or like a good blockchain ecosystem is, of course, like you need an impactful product, but like unfortunately, product is not the only thing that will drive people to your ecosystem, right? How do you capture mindshare? How do you capture that vibe, right?
Yeah.
I feel creating an organic community is very difficult, which you guys have already done, so kudos to you on that. But all of that also needs to be engineered, right? So how did you like engineer building an organic community back in the day? Like what worked for you guys?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I don't think there was much engineering behind it. There was a lot of trial and error and just figuring out like, what are people interested in what are people interested in?
Could you talk about some of those trial and error experiments?
I can talk to some of them for sure. I was less involved. I mean, when we brought in Bill Monday, he really took the helm and was steering the different trial initiatives in the early days of like 2023. Before that, it was actually Keone behind the hood of Discord. And just trying to keep it lively and entertaining, and that's really what it came down to, just being lively and entertaining. I think what we found is the community is always excited when someone from the team hops on. Over this past weekend, there was actually a pretty big karaoke on the Discord, and Keone hopped in just to listen, and people were like, "Oh my God, like he's here!" So just being engaging, I think, is really critical.
Right.
So that's like step one, being engaging, and then also to listen. I think oftentimes you find what you were saying, like there's over engineering of trying to force function what a specific community should look like.
Right.
But with the Monad community, the way that it came about organically is by listening to and like seeing what was interesting to begin with. And I think that's where the culture of like the Mon artists came about. There's a lot of creatives within the Monad community. And it was basically, I think it was more of just like being able to recognize and raise up that type of talent, and doubling down on it, and everyone there is having a lot of fun. The Monad community, the Monad team, like we're all deriving, I don't know, it's just something special, I'd say.
Right.
So finding that something special and then using that as a jumping off point would then create this organic flywheel.
Right. So, for example, like every different ecosystem has its own branding and like messaging, right? For example, Beta Chain with all the Beta baddies and like the degen focus. Mega ETH sort of like make Ethereum great again kind of vibe, right? With different hats and everything. With you guys, I feel it's more of those the purple soft toys and like those the creatures that you have, right? Where do you see this messaging go on towards like leading up to your testnet or mainnet, right? How do you inculcate that and keep it sustained? While building a community is really difficult, what's even more difficult is to keep it alive and like sustain it, right? So what are like some steps that you guys are thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so maybe going back to like other types of analogies, I'm trying to think of one here, but like with sports teams, for example, even when there are some super fans of sports teams, obviously it's great when your team is winning, but even when your team isn't doing well, like, yeah, it's a bummer, but it's not like you're going to give up on them.
Right.
And it's that sense of like culture and identity that I think really is what keeps a community together. And so, I'm seeing elements of that with the Monad community as well. Like people are legitimately friends. There have been a couple of community-based in IRL meetups across Europe and Asia, and so many people have turned up, meeting fellow friends in real life. It's like, oh, you were just a Telegram handle to me. Like, here you are in the flesh. That's really cool.
I think the next cycle, one of the biggest tokens that people are still looking forward to is Monad and like Beta Chain when it comes to the alt L1 ecosystem. How do you think of capturing mindshare when it comes to that?
It's probably an area that I don't have any comment on right now. So I'll leave it to the market to decide if and when there is something.
All right, let me try to frame it this way, right? Capturing mindshare, not just in terms of like token prices, but also for like to get more developers on board, right? If you don't have an active community or like a good performing asset out there, new projects wouldn't want to build their dApps on top of like your ecosystem, right? How do you plan on competing with other alt L1s like, for example, Verachain or Solana or the Move ecosystem, just in terms of like market share?
Well, I think it really comes down to building on a software stack that makes the most sense to you. It's the same thing with like application developers that are developing for Android or iPhone, like trying to decide which set of users is right for them, which technologies, which tooling is right for them. And so that's very much the case here. With Monad, you can take advantage of all of the existing EVM tooling. So a plethora of Solidity engineers would still be able to utilize those technologies. But then beyond that, the biggest differentiator is the unlock that you get within the EVM, within EVM. Other solutions might be doing things from like an L2 standpoint, but what Monad is building is fundamentally different from the ground up because we are rebuilding the client stack. We are rebuilding the execution stack, the execution and consensus stack. So it is materially different. And I think the builders that are going to find the most attraction to Monad are the ones that are looking for distinct, unique, differentiated performance.
Right.
That alongside with the strength of the community, because another aspect of it is, well, if I build a cool app but no one uses it, is it really that successful? Is it really going to move the needle? The Monad community is excited about Monad ecosystem projects that are going to be deployed. And that in and of itself, I think is a powerful thing to consider too.
Right. Is there like an active thought already that's been given into, let's say, airdrop strategies or like rewarding community members for their contribution right now?
Yeah, I'm the wrong person to ask as well.
All right. How does a day in the life of the co-founder of Monad look like?
I think it depends on which co-founder you talk to.
Okay, I'm talking to you, of course. Like, how does it look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, this one I think is a unique one. I'm rarely this far south in Manhattan, although I guess at this point we're pretty far north. There's the Empire State Building. Yeah, I think it's usually wake up, try to bang out a few emails in the morning with a cup of coffee, head into the office, and then it's a lot of meetings.
Yeah.
Handful of internal, handful of external. But I think for me, since there's, I work right now with the ecosystem, business development, and operations teams. So I get a lot of variability throughout my day. I love chatting with our team and thinking through how to problem solve, depending on what exactly we're tackling on a day-to-day. Today is a unique one. It's the first day of Monad Madness, which is a new initiative. It's basically a pitch competition. So we've invited 20 teams to compete for a pretty big prize pool alongside a lot of notable VCs as well. So it's a great networking opportunity for all types of application teams who are either looking to fundraise or are just looking to broaden their network of connections. And same with VCs and other members of the community, other members of the crypto industry. So yeah, it really differs on a day-to-day.
Yeah.
If I am lucky, then maybe at the end of the day, I'll sneak off and do a quick yoga session or something like that.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. Starting Monad Madness the right way on the boat.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Okay, so now you're at a stage where your testnet is about to go live and you'll have to attract even more builders to build on your ecosystem, right? What is the pitch for builders? Why should they build on Monad other than the tech stack? Right? Tech stack is beautiful, like we've heard about it. What other ecosystem support can we expect from the Monad Lab or Monad Foundation?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so there's various types of support. I think Monad Madness is actually a great example of it, connecting builders who are in need of funding, who are at a stage where their product is very well defined and they're just looking for support to go to market. So that's like one aspect. We have a designer who has actually been working with a number of teams to give individual feedback about their UI, the user friendliness of their application, and even basic things such as like what color scheme to use, you know, or like how do you use buttons versus like drop downs and this and that. Otherwise, the team, I'd say in general, is extremely friendly and welcoming. We're always eager to chat with new project teams, and always open to provide feedback and guidance to whatever extent we can.
How did you all come up with the name Monad?
So it was interestingly the working name of the project,
okay.
Even in its early days. There was a time where we were thinking of like, let's try to find an actual name for it. And so we spent maybe a week or so of just listing out like all of these like optional names, but none of them panned out. Like they were either too cringe or like too basic or already taken. Monad is interesting because it is fundamentally it comes from a functional programming term.
Okay.
But then beyond that, there's also the philosophical definition of being like basically like a singularity, like a basic unit, so to speak, a fundamental unit. So it just made a lot of sense from both its meaning. It's a little nerd snipey, and at the same time, it's easy to spell across any language. Like the likelihood that you'll get Monad right on the first try is pretty high. So you know, we were also thinking about SEO to some extent.
All right. Let's talk about the Monad ecosystem, right? So now, given like you have a beautiful office in New York, and I mentioned to you that like New York still feels like home for Monad. But how is like your geographical planning looking, right? Like when it comes to different parts of the world, LATAM, let's say emerging markets, how does your strategy look for that, for global expansion?
Right. Yeah. I think with any team that's building a universal project, you know, Monad is a global blockchain, so there's always going to be a need for a global presence. Right now, there's a couple of team members that we have throughout Europe and Asia, and definitely looking to continue to grow in those areas too.
One thing that I really loved was the TPS concept of how you guys have been calculating it, right? So Monad is boasting of a 10,000 TPS, and there's a fundamental difference between how some blockchains calculate TPS versus how you're using like the historical data, right? Can you like expand more on that?
Yeah, totally. It all comes down to the fungibility, or rather lack of fungibility with transactions. So a transfer is the simplest form of a transaction, but like all transfers are a transaction. Not all transactions are a transfer.
Right.
So these days, there's like very, very complex transactions that are on the blockchain, far greater than like a typical transfer. So to say that, like, I mean, let's just give a unit to it. Let's say a transfer is worth like a 1 point or something along those lines. But other transactions can be worth 10 points. So to say that like one transaction is equal to 10 I think you kind of understand the nuance here. Yeah. So basically, the way that we're doing benchmarking is by using real transactions on Ethereum, and that emulate essentially real use cases because it is live. Instead of just using transfers as a proxy for trying to ramp up the TPS number artificially, the idea is to use real world data. And so that's where replaying Ethereum history comes into play. And the reason why we can do that is because Monad is fully EVM compatible.
Right. Now that like when you have like an internal DevNet that's live and everything, right, and a testnet is coming out, are there any specific areas of dApps that you're focusing on, or that's your like focus internally, that this is the market share, this is the domain that we need to capture first, and then we can like grow from there?
Yeah, I'm most excited about consumer apps, to be honest.
Okay.
I think there's like a new wave of applications that we can and will see, especially with increased design space, with more TPS, for example, and just like more computing power. So yeah, consumer apps.
Okay. Are there any interesting ideas that have already been building on Monad internally that you're aware of, and you want to like just give them a shout out or like just talk about them?
Yeah, there's certainly. I'll start by saying Kizzy is a pretty cool one. They're a team that has been building for some time now, but they're doing like a social media betting platform, which I think will be really cool because it joins a lot of interests across social media that's already so prevalent within our lives, with a fun aspect of what makes crypto fun, like the the degen kind of feel. So yeah.
Right. All right. That. And for people right now, like probably this is going to go out live in like 3-4 weeks or something. What are some immediate things that people can do and like just connect with the Monad community or the Monad ecosystem? How can they contribute?
Yeah, for sure. Well, one thing would be to join the Discord if you haven't done that yet. There is a link from the website right now.
For all the karaoke nights.
Yes, exactly, for all the karaoke nights. So that's one easy way to get plugged in. Otherwise, like, my DMs are open. They are backlogged. So like, I don't know how quickly I'll be able to get to them, but that's always an option.
Don't switch your phone again.
I know. No worries. Like, we're one and done. So we'll be good for some time now.
And before we log off, what are some suggestions for people watching this for top 3 things to do in New York?
Ooh, okay. Definitely something food related. There's so many different kinds of pizzas here. Like, you can find Detroit pizza, which I highly recommend, New York style thin pizza, the dollar pizza. So yeah, go for food. The second thing, if you haven't been on the water, do it. Like, this was so fun. I think it might have been my maybe second time ever on a ferry, on like the water ferry.
Yeah.
So get on the water somehow, whether it's like along the what is this, the East River?
Yeah, East River.
East River or on the Hudson, do that. Last thing, I would go to an observation tower as well. My favorite right now is the Vanderbilt building. It's one of the newer observation centers, but from that vantage point, not the highest, but from that vantage point, you see the Empire State Building, you see Rockefeller Center. I think on a clear day, you could see the World Trade Center. So yeah.
How come you haven't invited them to your office?
Well, that's a good question.
Invite only?
Yes, we do have an office space for builders who are looking to co-work. Hop into my DMs.
Awesome. Very nice doing this with you, Eunice. Thank you so much. This was a pleasure hosting you, and we should do this sometime soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Charvel.
Awesome. I think we can still get off there.
Okay.
Yeah, because this will be closer for you.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Eunice, say bye to the camera.
Bye.